Hi there, welcome to Outdoor Gear Chat. We are recording episode 55 from Kendal Mountain Festival in the sunshine on the second day. This is amazing, isn't it? I'm joined as always by Cathy. Hello.
Hi Wayne. Yeah, we are seeing again Kendal at its absolute best today. It is just stunning. It's wintry, it's frosty, we've got blue skies, and the festival itself is just buzzing. And we have got some fantastic people to speak to today. And I'm so psyched. We're actually joined today by Alice Sainsbury, who is the designer of Berghaus Adapts, and we're going to learn all about what that is. So welcome, Alice.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it is great to meet you. We've just been sort of talking before we started, because I didn't actually know what Berghaus Adapts was. I'm just going to give a very, very brief outline. It's looking at clothing, outdoor clothing specifically for people that have additional needs, I think is the fair way of putting it. But I'm going to let you explain much more succinctly and professionally what that is and how Berghaus Adapts came about.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it's come about in quite an organic way, really, and really started with Ed Jackson. Who is quadriplegic, spinal cord injury, and kind of the way that he's sort of transitioned into being in the outdoors and mountaineering, and actually then the additional needs that he has with the different impairments and levels of disability that he has. It's actually then you've got the challenge of how do you adapt that gear for him, his needs, and the environments that he's going to be in. So it's all about adapting, which is, I think, really encompasses the mindset of what we do. It's about adapting. It's not about it's about breaking down barriers. So it's not the black and white, you can't do this because you've got this thing going on. It is, okay, how do we adapt? How do we make this possible? And how do we change the narrative within doing that?
Oh, that's fascinating. And it actually takes me back to a time, a long, long time ago, back in the early 90s when I started out in outdoor retail, and we actually had a customer come back in. And this is back in the day when it was like a Berghaus lightning jacket in red or royal blue or green. And that was pretty much, the offering of Gore-Tex jackets at the time. And this customer came in and he was a double amputee on his arms, which were different lengths. And he was off out on a trip. And my now husband, who was the manager at the time, he said, "Oh, why don't we get the jacket like tailored to your arms?" And he said, "Can you do that?" And we said, "Yeah, sure. Let's give Berghaus a call." And they said, "Sure." We sent the jacket back to Newcastle, and the jacket came back, and it looked magnificent. It looked like it had just been made for him. The arms had just been shortened. All of the tabs were there. Everything. It was a working jacket fitted, absolutely tailored just to his measurements perfectly, and he was over the moon, absolutely over the moon, and he just went out and had loads of great adventures. So it's just amazing to me, with this time. I mean, it's sad it's taken so long, for all of this to come forward, but fantastic that Berghaus are taking the lead on this, and creating this whole new area for people with all sorts. I'm going to say it's all manner of different abilities rather than disabilities, because Ed in particular has gone on since his injury to complete Mirror Peak in 2019. He set up his M2M Foundation, which with his wife, which is incredible. He's gone out and climbed the Himalayan Himal, and then his film Alpha, which is showing at this 2024 festival, tells the story of the first fully disabled team crossing of Europe's largest ice cap in Iceland. Yeah. So the word disabled isn't, it's not correct. But you've obviously got, as you say, clothing for use in an extreme environment with people that need to use their clothing differently. What challenges are there in adapting current designs?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I think there's just a couple of things to break down there, which is, we were talking briefly about this before, about the word disability and disabled.
Yeah.
And I think that what we have done for so long in our society is we've used a medicalized model to explain it, where it then puts onus on the person with that impairment or condition and somehow makes them the problem. Whereas I much prefer to look at the societal model of disability, where it's more about the fact that, yes, I mean, you have to think about it. We're all human. We all have different things going on. We all experience different conditions, even motherhood and menopause and everything else that goes with that. So we're human. And so, really the societal model says that actually people with an impairment, the world isn't designed for them. We've designed a society that isn't inclusive. And therefore the societal model is that society has disabled those people. So I prefer to say disabled people because they're disabled by society. And I think that is kind of what has happened so much with everything that we do, that is just kind of, it's one model fits all, we see that in clothing anyway all the time. It's one body type, it's one size. And I mean, when I started off in the industry, there weren't actually even that many women designing for women. It was very much a male dominated environment. So when you think about, actually, we've come quite a long way already in kind of 20 years. For me, it never feels fast enough, but there you go. So I think that's kind of a really important thing to establish, is that, kind of with the adapts that we're doing, it is about changing that narrative from the black and white. There really has been a black and white narrative of either you are a burden on society and you can't do anything, or you have to somehow overcome your disability or impairment to prove something. And I think, Ed's narrative is amazing because he talks about all of the nuances in between, but equally the outdoors is so vital for people's health and well-being. We are nature and we need to be in nature, particularly when we're in recovery and when we're dealing with difficult bodily things of being human. And so really it should be able to cater towards anyone who wants to be outdoors. And of course, as I say that, it sounds very simplistic, but of course it does come with challenges. And I think it's one of the things that I spend a lot of time is kind of mapping out different impairments and disabilities and chronic conditions, because there's actually quite a few overlaps and there's a lot of nuances that people wouldn't know about. And I mean, for example, with EDS, if I talk through that one briefly, because I can give you some more examples of some very different challenges in a minute. But for ED, for example, when you have a spinal cord injury, you generally do not sweat and lose heat from below that injury site. And EDS is very high up. So he loses all of his heat and heat dumps from the very top of his body, which means that everything that we know in the industry as industry standards about the safetiness of a jacket, being in kind of below zero conditions and sweat and everything else goes completely out the window. So with Ed, it's about getting in that ventilation in the top of the jacket so that heat can really be able to escape. And then there's other things such as, I think everyone, I think there is very much this idea of the visible disability. So you can clearly see, and I'm sure Ed wouldn't mind me saying, that his gait when he walks, you can see that he's had something neurological because of his gait. And so for when he's climbing a mountain, it's a very obvious adaptation in that he has a pull on his trousers so he can pull his leg when he's climbing. But then there's other things that you wouldn't know about and you wouldn't see, which is that, he has to wear a permanent catheter a lot of the time. So how do you set up his trousers for carrying a catheter? And and then it's other things like dealing with the hygiene, because as you'll see in Alpha, which I don't want to give too much away, UTIs are a huge issue.
Of course.
And then when it comes to women, you've just got your head around that. But then when it comes to women, we use intermittent catheters, which are a completely different setup. And so actually, I think what Ed's doing a brilliant job of is actually talking about all the very unsexy things like bladder and bowels, because those are one of the greatest barriers that I think a lot of people have in getting into the outdoors in general. And we have an incredibly active but older population who are also going to be encountering all these things. And
it's really interesting. We talk about that, haven't we? We talked about when we talked to the lady from the British Antarctic Survey, and we were saying about that, the toileting stuff. We rarely talk about it, but actually we need to. It is a blocker to going in the outdoors. I can't do that because it's and we need to remove those barriers.
Do. Absolutely.
So I think we've talked about Ed, obviously, because he's a sponsored athlete for Berghaus. I read up on him before we talked, and it's absolutely fascinating story. But are there any plans for the future?
What with Adapts?
Yeah,
absolutely. So I mean, I guess kind of it's really interesting because the way that I came into Adapts was being a beneficiary of Millimeters to Mountains.
Okay.
Because in 2015, I had a spinal cord injury from a neurological disease. I was paralyzed on my left side. I have all the complications, all the lovely bladder, bowel, heart issues, all kinds of things, a lot that's very invisible and visible. And so kind of we realized that actually kind of having that lived experience and having people on the project with lived experience is so important to understand the nuances of what's going on. And at the moment, we're working on a really interesting project with the Deaf Blind Project, who is a girl called Caroline, who wants to be the first blind and deaf woman to summit Everest.
Wow.
So we're working a lot, actually, not only on kind of how she interacts with her guide, but also integrating assistive technology, such as a haptic communication system, which is a vibration communication system, which, when you think about it, goes from being something that is adaptive for a person with certain needs to actually being a universal design that
That's
can be
awesome.
an amazing communication tool in mountaineering.
Yeah.
So that's an incredibly exciting project at the moment. And
you have to think about like wider applications of all sorts for emergency services or search teams or whatever. That's incredible.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And I think that we kind of need to think about it in those terms. I mean, it's like the electric toothbrush that was designed as an assistive technology for people with disability. It's now a universal product that we all use and makes our lives easier. So I think it's kind of looking ahead to how we can implement things. And of course, it's just the next year can't say too much right now, but we are absolutely expanding out on this. And I think all the different narratives of what people live with is also very important. So also today we have the Adapts film previewing, which involves Charlotte and Tom. Charlotte has a spinal cord injury, Tom has brain injury, and highlighting actually what we've done to adapt the kit, but also really what is given to them and their connection with the outdoors. So I think a lot more of kind of breaking down barriers and breaking down narratives to come.
I mean, it's phenomenal. And thank you so much, Alice, for your time. It's been great to speak to you. We could carry on and talk all morning. And I'm sure, actually, this is probably going to continue into a much longer podcast at some point in the future. With all
she says, winking heavily. Yeah. Thanks. Please come back and tell you that. It is amazing because you think about the podcast we did with Susanna Cruikshank about sizing for females, particularly. This is an even wider extension of that sort of chat, isn't it?
It's being human. And that is what we have tried to, I think, we're hearing it all around Kendal at the moment, all these other narratives that veer away from pushing harder, pushing faster, and actually embracing our humanness.
Yes.
And I think that's where we're at now, which is so important.
Yeah. No, it's exciting times. And if you would like to find out more information about Berghaus Adapt, then you can just pop Berghaus Adapt into your favorite search engine and that will lead you to their website where there's loads more information. We have also lots of broader information about how to keep warm in the outdoors, how to deal with things like periods on mountains. So lots of inclusive information on our website, which is the Joe Brown Outdoor Academy website. And you can find that at www.joebrownoutdooracademy.com.